I'm sorry.
Meeting back to order. Commissioner Schuster.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. Continue, Darrell, with that.
If we pick up where we left off, I believe the commission made a motion to accept the amendment that was proposed. However, I believe you have to make a motion to accept the proclamation as proposed.
Correct. I make a motion that the Wildlife Committee pass Proclamation 12-07 concerning the wildlife management area hunting seasons as presented. Do I have a second? Any discussion, further discussion from the commission? All right.
As
Is it
amended.
as amended? Okay. That was just a recommendation from Steve, so as amended. Do I have a second? Any discussion? Questions from the audience? Those in favor say aye. Opposed? The ayes carry and Proclamation 12-07 passes as amended.
The next three proclamations that we are presenting should go really quickly. The first one is Proclamation 12-08, which are the hunting seasons and bag limits on national wildlife refuges. And to give you a quick summary of what occurred in this, there was just minor changes, mostly liberalizations to deer seasons on the following national wildlife refuges. There were no changes on Tennessee National, Cross Creeks, or Big South Fork. And then a few minor changes and clarifications in the general regulations. So if you have any questions on the NWR proclamation, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions? All right. I make a motion that the Wildlife Committee pass Proclamation 12-08 concerning the National Wildlife Refuge and other public hunting area hunting seasons. Do I have a second? Any further discussion, audience, commission? All right. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes carry and Proclamation 12-08 passes.
The next proclamation that we bring forward is a new proclamation. We did not present this last month, but what this is, Proclamation 12-09, is the repeal of the importation of cervid carcasses and parts. That proclamation, just to shine some light on it, that was a proclamation in which the commission would designate which areas of the state were banned from hunters bringing back deer carcasses unless they were processed in a certain way. The reason we're repealing this proclamation is that it's addressed in a rule. There was a rule change a few months ago that gives the commission the authority to identify those areas. The reason this is much better addressed in rule is if a new area is discovered with CWD and we want to ban that area, the commission can come back and vote on it, and it doesn't take a proclamation change. They could just accept what the changes are, and we could post that on our website so it'd be effective immediately. To give you an idea of what these areas are, and there was a slight change this year than what we saw last year, but this is information that we currently put on our website, and these are the restricted areas for bringing back cervid carcasses. And what I mean by cervid is deer carcasses or elk or moose. If you look at the top right-hand corner of the map here, all those states highlighted in yellow, if you hunt in any of those areas where the entire state is highlighted, if you bring back a cervid carcass from those areas, you have to make sure that you process the carcass accordingly. And what we mean by that is the meat has to be removed, or the antlers have to be attached to clean skull plates, so as not to penalize our Tennessee hunters that hunt very close by to our state. We do have some states that are bordering us or very close to bordering us that do have CWD infected areas. Instead of banning the entire state from the hunters bringing back those cervid carcasses, those states have identified individual counties or CWD containment zones. In Missouri, they've now identified 2 counties. They're right next to each other, and those are Lynn and Macon counties. We did add these 2 counties up in Illinois. The restriction used to be north of Interstate 80, but we have added LaSalle and Grundy counties because they do have CWD positives in those counties. So we added that, and there is another county added in Virginia, which was Shenandoah County. So any of the hunters that hunt in these surrounding states, it's only if they hunt in these yellow highlighted areas that they would have to process their deer carcass accordingly. And this information will be posted on our website. In fact, it may be posted already or close to it. And this way the commission can just approve it at a moment's notice whether or not we want to add any more areas to this. Any questions on this proclamation?
Are the those areas that we flagged, are they in our hunter manual?
No, what we're going to do with the hunting guide is refer people to our website. That way we could update it. If we put it in the hunting guide and something changes,
Okay.
we would never be able to prosecute anything. So the hunting guide will refer people to our website.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Make a motion that the Wildlife Committee pass Proclamation 12-09 concerning the repeal of cervid carcass importation. Do I have a second? Any further discussion, commission, audience? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes carry and Proclamation 12-09 passes.
The next proclamation, again, is another repeal of a proclamation. This is where we repeal the elk hunting seasons. And I want to just reaffirm we are not getting rid of the elk hunting seasons. We are simply moving it to the big game proclamation. And so we need to repeal the proclamation, I believe it was 12-01, and make sure that we move everything to the big game proclamation.
Right. Any questions, commission, for Darrell? All right. I make a motion that the Wildlife Committee pass Proclamation 12-10 concerning the repeal of the elk hunting season. Do I have a second?
Second.
Further discussion, commission, audience? All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hold on.
One quick question.
Yes, come on up to the,
My name's Scott Carter. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. Does this mean that elk hunting will now be the same dates and everything as regular deer season?
No, it's simply nothing changes with the elk seasons. We're moving all the elk regulations into the big game proclamation,
Okay.
and so nothing changes with the
All
elk
right.
season.
Thank you.
all right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes carry and Proclamation 12-10 passes.
We're going to get into the two final proclamations that we will be presenting today. I'll cover the falconry real quick. Oh, I didn't mean to put that in there. I swear I did not. That was left over from last month. Anyway, I thought I took that out. The issue with Proclamation 12-04 is Tennessee falconers, they've asked that the trapping season for raptors to be extended by 1 month. And we discussed with the Fish and Wildlife Service as well as our agency biologists, and we did not have a problem. This just gives them extra time to capture their birds, and therefore the agency is recommending that we amend the raptor take proclamation to start the trapping season on August 15th instead of September 15th. If you have any questions, Walter Cook is our captive animal coordinator, and he'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Questions from the commission at this point? All right, I make a motion that the Wildlife Committee amend Proclamation 12-04 by stating the trapping seasons for raptors on August 15th of each year instead of September 15th. Do I have a second? Further discussion from the commission or from the audience? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes carry and the amended Proclamation 12-04 passes.
At this point in time, we're going to introduce Proclamation 12-05, and I'll introduce Steve Nifong, our Assistant Chief of Law Enforcement.
Thank you, Darrell.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. We did an extensive revision of the manner and means last year for our proclamation. What we've done this year is made some fairly minor changes to deal with some clarification of certain regulations. In Section 1, under legal hunting devices, we specified centerfire rifles and handguns, since technically shotguns could be called centerfire weapons. So that was a nomenclature change. In Section 2, prohibited acts, we modified number 5 by adding language that any feeder, and in this final version we have said electronic feeder, has to be disabled at least 10 days prior to hunting to deal with some of the noise issues that could continue to draw animals to a bait site. In Section K, we added prohibition against any firearm, including air rifles, using archery bolts. This closed up a potential loophole in regulation on air rifles. In Section 5, we clarified the regulation on crows by adding language showing that crow hunters are exempt from the magazine plug requirements. That's allowable by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service regulation, so we clarified that issue this time. And in Section 6, the miscellaneous section, we've added actually 4 regulations, I think, by today, designed to better clarify areas where we get a number of questions every year. First one dealt with the deer archery only season and the fall turkey season, and we've added a regulation that states during a deer archery only season, a fall turkey hunter may not be in possession of both archery equipment and firearms. That was a very frequent question, and it clarifies what they cannot do. There is a state statute against archery hunters being in possession of a firearm, so it's clarified that. This is an addition, or perhaps a clarification. It's always been a gray area in the regulations. It says a legal muzzleloader and/or gun deer hunter may be in possession and use rimfire rifles or pistols and/or air rifles for small game. This allows them to small game hunt at the same time they're deer hunting. And then further clarified, doing archery only or muzzleloader archery only deer, bear, or elk season, fur bearers may not be taken with rifles and handguns using centerfire ammunition. During the gun muzzleloader archery season, fur bearers may be taken by legal big game hunters licensed for the weapon they're using. This deals with the issues of coyote hunters out there using centerfire during some of the big game season. It clarifies what they may and may not do. We had some recommendations from the commission at the April meeting, and since that meeting, we've added the following. Pursuant to federal regulations, during the blue, snow, and Ross geese conservation season, waterfowl hunters may use unplugged shotguns and electronic calls. In the migratory bird section, we've also added in the miscellaneous section, the use of suppressors, silencers is legal for persons possessing the required federal license from the United States Department of Treasury. Hunters using these devices must have proof of such license on their person. A photostatic copy of their license will suffice. And then to clarify issues surrounding the handgun carry permit is how it applies to some of the manner and means regulations. We have added this rather lengthy section dealing with that. And I'll give you a second to read over it, and we'll not read it. I'll be happy to address any questions about any of these regulations at this point.
I'm a little confused on the process about to disabling the feeders. Did the legislators not pass something on bait this year about 300 yards and
No,
was that
sir.
passed?
No, sir, that was an internal enforcement policy that we came up with on working the baiting statute.
So they're still illegal to bait, period, correct? Okay, I just want to clarify that because I'd heard some other things and I was confused.
There was in one of our discussions, I
think maybe when the commission's down there, or some other time, one of the ideas from Representative Curtis was that there was a feeling that these feeders were just as attractive to the sound as they were to the feed, and suggestion made possibly you disable those, the electronic portion of them, so they wouldn't make the sound. Maybe the emphasis.
Yes, it was.
Does anyone else on the commission have questions for Steve? All right. Moving forward, I make a motion that the Wildlife pass Proclamation 12-05 concerning statewide and wildlife management area regulations and deal with the hunting methods and weapons. Do I have a second? Second. Any more discussion from the audience or commission? Yes. Oh, okay. That sounds good. Mr., would you like to come forward, please?
My name's Vance Bivens. I'm with the Tellico Bar and Board Club in Tellico Plains, Tennessee. I'd like to thank you all for the strides and the things, the progress that you all have made. I'm one of those bear and hog hunters. It's we've all been very displeased. And if you're dedicated to bear and hog hunting, in reality, more than 50% of our hog hunting was taken away from us. And we don't deer hunt, and most of us don't. We dedicate our time to training our dogs. And I just like between now and sometime between now and September that if there's a possibility for y'all to reconsider this issue about if you kill a bear and you're not, then it makes you ineligible to take your gun back in the woods with you. So in essence, if a person killed a bear first day of bear season, you're severely damaged. You can hang around but a lot of people would be afraid to turn their dogs loose if they didn't have a way to, if they got on a real mean hog and their dogs was being killed. And you can rest assured that there's the owner of the dogs has a little more incentive to get to them. If they hear a terrible fight going on and their hogs are getting jabbed, their dogs are getting jabbed and punctured, they have an incentive to get there and try to protect their dogs. And there's a lot of people, when they get close to one of those ordeals like that, they'll turn and they'll go back the other way. So if you could find a way, and we as hunters, we look at it, that's a reasonable request. We did have an opportunity when there was a hog hunt. If you killed a bear, you could go back hunting and taking your dogs, you carry your gun, and so we think to us as dog owners and hunters, it's a reasonable request to be able to take our gun back. And if there's anything you can do for us, we'd appreciate it. And I want to thank you for what you have done and progress that you've returned some hunting back to us. And I don't know if you realize that more than 50% of our hunting had been taken away from us when the hog hunting was removed. And the reason I'm saying more than 50% because you run more hogs than you did bear. And so that's why I'm saying that more than 50% of it was taken away. And thank you for this opportunity.
Question. How many of you hunt by yourself?
Usually there'll always be two go into the woods together,
So the odds that one of you is going to have a gun are pretty high, right? It's
Well,
not likely that both of you killed a bear the first day of the season.
that's true. That is very true. But when we get in there and the dogs start splitting up, more than likely we won't see one another until we get back out. And of course we've got radios, we're in communication, and stuff like that. But most of the time we're in there, maybe not too awfully far away from one another, but we're in there separated. My ear will tell me the race is going over here, and maybe the dogs do split up. A lot of times that does happen, and maybe the other hunter will go in different directions. But very seldom are we together, fully all the time. So, any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bivens. Appreciate you coming. All right. Those in favor, say aye to Proclamation 12-05. Opposed? The ayes carry and Proclamation 12-05 passes. Thank you.
Just to wrap things up, those were all the proclamations that the agency was bringing forward.
Thank you, Daryl. Appreciate all the time and effort your staff put into doing the 2012, 2013 regulations. Thank you. Okay, the Wildlife Committee recognizes Gray Anderson, Assistant Chief of the Wildlife Division.
Thank you, Commissioner Schuster. What I'm presenting this afternoon is some discussions that have been going on and some concerns we've had with how we deal with large parcels and wild hog exemptions. What we put in place initially back in July of last year was basically 10 designees per contiguous hunting block, or kind of contiguous block. And then we're allowing 10 designees per that tract. And one of the questions that continues to arise is that sufficient to get the job done? What can we do to help landowners out that are large landowner or large blocks? And so one of the things we want to do is kind of look back at what happened with our 2012 or 2011 designees and exemptions and their designees, and just a little bit of history and see what we can learn out of that. And so just looking at, and this is data that we got back. So once we cut some of this out, and gleaned the information that everybody had the proper information. We're talking about 450 or some odd people that actually we're using in this little analysis that we have. We also cut out people that were on exemptions that were less than 10 acres. We had some people that were quarter acre exemptions when we didn't, we didn't know exactly what was going on. So we stopped at 10 acres on this. So 23 exemptions in Region 1, 4.1 designees per exemption, and they average half a hog per exemption. And so Region 2, 33, 6.9 people on their exemptions and 3.2 animals per exemption taken. Obviously Region 3 we know is heavy hitter here, 306, average half full on their 10, 4.9, taken 4.7 hogs. And then Region 4 was 68 exemptions with 5.3 designees and 2.5 in their take. And so we see some consistency. The average on the number of designees kind of fluctuates, but it's fairly somewhat consistent. Exemption sizes, looking at what size average in Region 1, 200 acres, average in Region 2, 180 acres. Region 3, we start blowing up, but you're looking at where we're starting to run into some problems. 8,800 contiguous acres as a problem, 241 in Region 4, and again, 4,900 acres of contiguous blocks. So these areas are starting to increase. But this also points to East Tennessee is where the large blocks are, tend to occur, where some of our base concerns are coming from. And then getting into some relatively drab graphs here, but when you look at this graph, what you're looking at is the number of hogs, the number of exemptions issued by parcel size. So and this is broken down by 100-acre increments out to 3,000 acres. And so you start to see that 100 acres, we're issuing, most of our parcels are under 100, 200 acres, and then when you pull it all out and you just say at our 100, let's just close it off at 1,000 acres, we're looking at 95% or 97% of all of our exemption holders from last year are under 1,000 acres. And so I think our number, it's been a while since I looked at the whole numbers, I think it was somewhere around 28 landowners were actually above the 1,000-acre mark last year. So it's a really small number of people that we're dealing with at this point. This graph here is just looking at as parcel size increases, how does the number of designees increase or decrease? And you see a slight trend as the parcel size increases. The people are asking for more designees to be put on there. So at a small parcel, just under 5. By the time you get out to 1,000 acres, it's about 8 people. They're requesting more and more people per parcel. The interesting part, and this is basically what your hogs taken per exemption on the y-axis by parcel size, and you see that there's a regression line right there at 4. They don't do any better. The additional people on that area doesn't really help. And so it's pretty consistent that everybody across the board, no matter what parcel size or how many people you have on it, they're taking about 4 hogs per exemption. So it's very consistent across the state. The other interesting part of this is looking at what is the area of impact. You know, how many, this is basically the number of designees. And so you look at exemptions that have 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, up to 10 across the bottom, and then how many acres. And so divided by the average parcel size. The smaller acreages, you're averaging, those people are on average impacting 100 acres. And then that goes down pretty consistently until you get to about 5 exemptions. And then it's pretty consistent that these people on average are impacting 40 acres per exemption. So each designee is impacting 40 acres at that point. And this is the surprising, kind of crazy number that popped out, is the average kill per designee. And so once you start looking at, again, those 1 through 10, the effectiveness, the people that have very few people on their exemptions are the ones that are really doing a bang-up job. And so people with 1 and 2 are just knocking it out of the park. And then you get out to the 3 through 10, and they're averaging about a half a hog per person. So you see effectiveness of this going down. And we're not saying this is a bad thing, but we're saying there's an odd trend where some people are really, really being effective. Once you start adding a bunch of other people to it, it's largely marginal in that respect. So, but given all that, and I have to say this is a lot that came out of Region 3 and Kirk Miles, knowing that there's not a big impact. The number of people that you add to this doesn't seem to have a big impact. We're not really opposed to adding new people to these things. And so Kirk went out and found some stuff in NRCS in Alabama that it has an active funded program. And so where they're helping landowners kill hogs on their property. Science-based, they did a little legwork on the front end of that. And what they came up with is about 1 trap for every 200 acres. And that's their policy in Alabama, is they'll help pay for 1 trap per 200 acres. If we can assume 2 people can handle 1 trap, 10 designees per 1,000 acres, again, that hits our 97% of all people are covered under this 10 people per designee. So this is where we sort of come to this 1,000-acre break point, where we seem to be pretty comfortable as an agency at 1,000 acres. And then we propose at that point, after you reach 1,000 acres, you get to add 1 additional designee per 100 acres. And so that continues on that, pretty much that 200-acre per trap on up above 1,000 acres. So it's going to impact a very few number of people. And then we'll just handle this within our agency on the 1 additional designee per 100 acres. And all of this, and this is up for discussion. None of this is all handled through our field order. And so that's where our designee and our exemption process is handled. So it's not a proclamation, it's not a rule, it's an internal policy on how we issue these things. And so we propose this as a suggestion and seeing where the commission is comfortable with this. If we're comfortable with this process as it sits, we'll be happy to put it into our field order manual and move this process forward and hopefully address these concerns for the large parcels. And that's what I have presented for you today.
Thanks, Gray. Questions for Gray on the commission? Ideas, suggestions, approval?
What are we being asked to do as a commission?
I guess this is largely
Or is this information or?
Yes,
Right.
well, it's informational, and I guess we're reaching out to the commission, and if the commission is comfortable with, because I think administratively, the director's office has been getting hit hard with this large parcel question. I think the commission has been getting hit hard with this question. This is a solution to this question, but because it's an internal policy, it's not really a voting item, and so because it is handled in our field order manual, and so basically we're asking the commission are you comfortable with this process? If we add 1 person for every 100 acres over 1,000 acres, is this something the commission can live with? And do you want us to proceed with this? Do you want to think about it for a little bit before we move with it? Where do we want to go with this?
I guess the first question would be, does anybody oppose it at this point or have suggestions?
How does the public get word of this, that they can apply for additional designations?
We'll use all of our primary outlets, especially the hunting guide, and especially this is a really good time to hit this because the hunting guide is getting ready to be published. So we will make sure that everybody's aware of that, and I'm sure Region 3, you have something, Kirk? Oh, I thought you were raising your hand.
It's also, since they call the regional offices to get an exemption, when they call, that'll be on a list of questions, you know, how many acres do you have? If they say, I've got 1,500 acres, then the person handling the call would inform them, you're eligible for 5 more folks on your, so both avenues.
But just a curiosity point, and Daryl brings up this, and it's very interesting as far as Catoosa. We have 14 people work in Catoosa, I believe is the current number, and they're running out of space to work. They're kind of bumping into each other. And under this, it would be, 8,000 people would be allowed to work in an area the size of Catoosa. So you would get sufficient numbers of people under this process to cover an area.
How many requests have we had for extra designees on a piece of property over what was allowed?
Kirk?
Or what is allowed right now?
Region 3 is handling most of these, so.
When we first initiated the exemption process, I had at least 3 large landowners, and these were landowners like Bowater, the Cunningham properties, and another land LLC type large landowner that contacted me, and we started trying to work through this. I will say that a lot of this, when the commission acted with the leasees, a lot of these large properties are leased and there are multiple leases, so that now all their leasees, if it was before, September 2011, at that point, that provided a lot of relief to these large landowners, and I think this would just go further down that road.
I think it's a great step. I'm the slowest commissioner up here on absorbing all this stuff, and you've thrown a lot of numbers. So afterwards, I would love to see what you had up here just to study it, because if we get questions on it, I want to be able to answer the question, how'd you arrive there?
Right.
I think it is a great step, and I appreciate what you all have done.
Be happy to provide everything, and largely most of that information was just to try to learn a little bit, but.
With that, go ahead, Nat.
Great. Would you just throw out again the number, how many exemptions on greater than 1,000 acres had 10 people on? I mean, that's the group that we're talking about.
That had greater than 10 people on them?
No, that asked for 10.
Oh.
I mean, they can't have more than 10. And how many, of 1,000, how many potential people do we have?
They didn't all ask for 10, and so the number that are eligible, would be eligible under this program, is less than 28. So fewer than 30 people. We don't know what's going on in 2012, and a lot of those don't ask for 10. We've had very successful with under 10, and so oddly you saw a lot of our Region 2 areas requested more, 10, and so. I can get you the clear numbers if you'd like exact numbers, but it's a very, very small amount of people out there. So this, I think in a lot of ways, it just helps us answer a question on a very sticky issue. It's not really it's going to help some people. It will give the Region 3 and Region 4 folks an avenue to address this as necessary, but it's going to be a really small number of people that are going to be impacted by this.
I think the commission approves you moving forward with it, great. And
Okay.
I know it seems like a small number, but I think those people need the added
Oh, yeah.
support to take care of those hogs. So.
Absolutely, and that's why I say, even though we present some stuff that it's not terribly effective, as the number as they add a bunch of extra people, it doesn't really increase their success, but it's a very important process, and we fully believe this is the right way to go.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. That concludes the.
Thank you very much.